Hello YouTube, this is Steve, your English teacher, back at it again with the white vans. Today, C1 Speaking Part 3. This is the conversation task. So we're going to practice all the parts of this and how to do it well. This is what I put in class for my little starter when I'm teaching this to students. How do you feel before your speaking exam? What do you think is behind these yellow blanks, these yellow boxes? What are you doing with water coming from your face? You are sweating, your mind goes blank, it gets hard to think, you are breathing and your heart rate is going more quickly, rapid heart rate, and if it's very serious you might even have a tummy ache, oh dear. But follow all these tips and my other tips in part 1, 2 and 4 and you won't feel like this in the speaking exam. You will be prepared, you will know what to expect, you will have the tools available to do well in the speaking exam. So let's get into part 3. What is part 3? Part 3 is all about having a conversation. You are given a diagram like this with a question in the center. A question that is normally a bit complex, abstract, it's some social topic or something, that you need to demonstrate a high level of language to be able to talk about it well. It's not like B1 where it's which of these sports do you like the most. No, we're going beyond that. And you have different options. And the key thing is talking about the options. As you can see, the question is advantages and disadvantages. So you talk about them and you say, well, giving a lecture could be good because it's a great way of receiving information in a dense manner from an expert. However, it's only one way. You're just listening to someone in silence. A video conference can be good because you can stay at home, but maybe you can't read body language so well and you can get bored looking at a screen and so on. I'm answering the question, keeping the question in mind for the different options, and we are having a conversation. So that's what it looks like. How do we do it? Firstly, you have how many minutes to discuss? You should know this if you're preparing for C1. 2 minutes to discuss them and 1 minute to reach a decision. So after 2 minutes, the examiner will normally say, thank you, now you have 1 minute to decide the best way of communicating, for example. Then you can say, well, I think the best one is a face-to-face meeting because that's the most natural way and you can understand each other and make friends and so on. And as I keep saying, part 3 is the conversation task. One of the criteria in the speaking exam is conversation, communication, interactive communication. It's a whole criteria by itself, the same as vocabulary, grammar, delivery. It's a whole criteria. So it's really a skill that you need to demonstrate. Do you have the language, the functions, the social skills to have a conversation, not just deliver a monologue and then listen to the other monologue? No, all about conversation. So that's what we're going to be practicing. We're going to start with some useful phrases. How do you have a conversation? Well, honestly, you can be better or worse at this. Some people are naturally very social and comfortable and others are not. I am not. I had to learn this. Not really, but I guess we all do learn it. But here are some useful phrases that you can use in the exam. Firstly, you need to start. You're sitting there in the exam. Please talk about this. Which one shall we start? And what I'd recommend you do, this is your class, this is your C1 Speaking Part 3 class, in your notes, write down these useful expressions in the categories and complete the blanks to make you remember them, to make you think about it. Of course, it's which one shall we start with? Say, which one shall we start with? What do you think? You know a lot about, I just said the answer. You know a lot about that thing. What's your opinion? You know a lot about lectures. You're a student. What's your opinion on lectures? So this is how you could start this conversation. I say fake because it's a little bit artificial when you first start using all these expressions we're looking at, but it becomes more natural the more you do it. The same as anything, with practice it gets easier and better. So that's how you start. You introduce one of the topics, then you're going to be moving on to other ones. And as you can see, if you're paying attention, I just said the answer to the first one, but write these in your notes and try and complete them to think about useful expressions. You move on to another topic. You might compare different topics. You can, could, might compare two of the options. How do you feel about it? And then keeping the time in mind, if you're running out of time, you better move on to a different one. Quick point here that many students ask, do you have to talk about all of them? No, it's not. That would be a bit of a pointless thing to have to do in the exam. It's an English exam. They want to see you speaking English. If you speak good English about 3 of the topics, why would that be a problem? In fact, I'd recommend 2 or 3 in detail. Giving you a chance to access more language functions is better than just saying, what do you think about this one? I think it's great. And what about this one? I think it's bad. And because that's how you'd have to speak if you want to do all 5. So better to do 2 or 3 with some detail, in my opinion. And again, comparing them, you could say it's pretty similar to this one. You can skip it if there's 2 that are similar. Then you end your turn because it's all about passing on the conversation. So when you've made your point, so let's talk about this one. I think it's great. What do you think? Do, don't, would, wouldn't you agree? Or do you have anything to say about it? You're passing the conversation on, which we're going to see in a minute is so important in part 3, conversation. You can agree and disagree because you need, part of a conversation is not just giving your opinion and then asking a question, but it's also responding to the other person's opinion and showing that you've listened to them. And they notice this in the exam. If you really respond to them in a way that shows you're listening, that is part of the conversation, of the criteria for communication. So you could say, instead of just saying yes and no, good point, I fully agree, I was just thinking that, I was going to say that, that's exactly what I was thinking, or I couldn't agree more, you're totally right. So a bit of variety in how you're going to agree. And the same for disagreeing, politely, with reasons. Maybe means you're wrong. Maybe, but what about, I think it would be better, I'm not so keen on it, I don't really agree. Well, maybe, the problem with what you said, well, for one thing and for another. So you're always politely disagreeing and giving reasons. You can't just say, you are wrong and you are a grotesquely ugly freak. No, we have to be, well, I see what you mean, but you are disagreeing in a nice, polite way. So how are we going to practice this? You've got lots of phrases there. Let's get into practicing it. I think a great way to practice part 3, to understand how part 3 works, to train your brain in the skills you need, is to make your own part 3 exam. You can think of some random question topic. This was mine. How can technology improve school? Typical C1 idea. And think of what the options would be for this topic. What would they expect you to talk about? And what ideas would you include for each one? So we'll do this one together and then you can start making your own ones. For this, I'm thinking something like these options, which I prepared earlier. So this is what I think we'd probably be talking about, something like this. But why do I think that? That's the key, because when I said making presentations, I must have had some idea of what I could say about it, or else I wouldn't have said it. So I need to think about what I would say in the exam for this. Then I would use all my little phrases. Shall we start with making presentations? I think that students can present their work more professionally with a PowerPoint, for example. You can get more information in there, you can learn more. Would you agree? And that's it. That was 10 seconds. I'm very fast because I've done this a lot and I'm English, so it's a bit easy. But that's the framework, the idea that I want you to be able to do. So you make your own and add some ideas. Digital textbooks, what do you think the idea would be? They're lighter. It's great, isn't it? You don't have to carry lots of heavy textbooks and you can't leave them at home. Technology is improving school. Using computers, well, doing your research, being independent, not asking the teacher how to spell a word all the time, and maybe exploring your own interests, not just having to do the activity the teacher said, but if you're interested in it, you can do another activity, and so on. Online quizzes are a fun way of checking what you've learned. You have like a competition aspect, so maybe some people do better when it's a competition. They're more engaged and motivated. And we could talk about communication, which can be easy for sending work. You don't have paper flying everywhere. For asking doubts, if you're very shy, maybe it's easier to write a message on Teams or whatever platform. And if you can't find the teacher because it's outside of lesson hours, then it's a lot easier to send them a message. So full of ideas about how technology can improve school. And then we just turn those into a conversation using the structures we saw before, and that makes a very nice part 3. So your task is to make your own. Here's another possible task you think about. how helpful are these study tips? And I've given you some ideas. Could you complete it with 2 more? And then could you do it? If you've got a person with you who's also doing C1, if you're in class, do the task. Put the timer on, 2 minutes, have this conversation. Think about, talking about why these are helpful. How helpful are they? Well, this is good because, this is not so good because. And try and complete it. Think about typical ideas and how to have this conversation. What do you think about this one? Yeah, I see what you mean, but, and so on. Another one that I've made. Why would people choose to visit these places on a day off? Here we need to be a bit careful because we don't just want to say beach, park, museum. That's getting a bit B1. I think we need to try and be a bit more advanced. So I've gone with art gallery because that's a posh, fancy, cultural thing. So try and keep it a bit more, try and keep the level up. But try and think of more places where you could go into detail about why you would visit them. I mean, I guess you could say something like cinema, because then you can talk about film, but different places like that. Maybe more specific makes it better. But complete it, have this conversation. And this one as well, complete it, think about different types of relationships, and then have this conversation. And that's a good class you're having here with lots of practice. Once you've done it, come back, we're going to move on. I'm going to show you my suggestions for this now, so don't pause the video if you don't want to see them. Because we're moving on to think about getting into detail about how do you plan what you're going to say in one part. What should be going on in your brain when you are thinking, okay, I've got 15, 20 seconds to say my part, what do I say? Really, we're putting everything together that we've already talked about, putting the phrases with the ideas. So first, I would say start with one that you're comfortable with. We're talking about relationships, brothers and sisters. I've got a brother and a sister. I can say something about that. I've lived it. I've got a clear idea. My idea is that brothers and sisters fight because I used to fight a lot. Why do they fight? Always justifying what you say, explaining what you say. I think probably to get their parents' attention, maybe to get praise from their parents, or maybe just because kids are pushing the boundaries and seeing what they can do. But that's my idea. Then I need to turn it into a clear point and always remember, pass the conversation on. It's a conversation. So I make my point, then I actually want to know what you think because it's a conversation. So I'm interested in your take on what I said. So something like, well, let's start with brothers and sisters, as I have one of each. We used to fight a lot when we were growing up. I guess maybe because we wanted our parents' attention, or maybe just because kids are cruel. Do you see what I mean? And that's it, 15 seconds, and we clear point, pass the conversation on. And you continue like that. How do you continue? Because there's one more important thing I want to say. Imagine I just said that to you, or the other person in the exam just said that to you. What do you say in response? What you don't say is, and what about boyfriend and girlfriend? Oh, boyfriend. Maybe you were thinking about boyfriend and girlfriend because you had an idea, and that's understandable. But you need to respond to what they said first. So in your response, you need to acknowledge their point, acknowledge what they said. You are listening, it's a conversation. You can also be thinking about other ideas, but you need to try and be listening to what they're saying so you can acknowledge it and then move on with your point and continue like that. So something like, of course, I didn't get on too well with my brother when I was young, but now we're very close. So I've actually acknowledged what they said, brothers and sisters. What else? Well, I think a parent-child relationship can be difficult because children want to rebel against their parents. They want to stay out late and get a tattoo and all those things. And parents don't want this. They try and avoid this. What do you think? Yeah, I see what you mean. Being a parent must be very difficult, and being a child as well. It's a difficult relationship. But what about boyfriend and girlfriend? Because here you have to, and you continue like that. So you acknowledge what they say, give your own little point if you can, and continue the conversation. And in the 2 minutes, if you're going like this, clear point, moving on, you should be aiming for 4 to 5 contributions for each person. Because if we're looking at 15, 20 seconds, if they were really 15 seconds each, that would be 4 contributions each. and then maybe plus all the little, yeah, I see what you mean, yeah, but like little contributions like that. A natural conversation, react to what they're saying. The examiner will notice, even if you just put a little, that's true. You're not interrupting them, you're just, yeah, that's true. It's a real conversation, so try and do that kind of thing. Right, that's the conversation part. Then we move on to the conclusion. Thank you. Now you have 1 minute to decide. It's this part. What do you think the decision question would be for this task? Normally it's the most or the least, whatever. So for this task, it would probably be something like, which relationship is the most difficult to maintain? Because we're talking about problems. So which relationship has the most problems or can be the most problematic, most difficult, something like that. And you answer this in a similar way. What do you say? Trying to sum up what was said before, because you've already been talking about this for 2 minutes. You've already been talking about, well, this is difficult because this is difficult because what's the most difficult? You're summing up what you said before. Try not to repeat yourself. Try to vary your language a little bit. For example, which is the most difficult to maintain? Okay, so I would say parent-child, because like I said, children are very rebellious and parents want to protect them, so they're always going to disagree. Would you agree? I see what you mean, but I'm thinking brothers and sisters, because brothers and sisters are just always fighting. They want to push the limits of what they can do. It's a difficult situation. I don't know. Well, maybe we agree to disagree, but I think something like that. So you're trying to, come to a conclusion. You don't have to agree. Again, it's not like some kind of peace treaty negotiation. It's an English exam. It's nice if you can agree, if you can use some of this language of, okay, I think we're on the same page here. Parent-child is the most difficult relationship. But you don't have to. The main point is you're understanding each other and developing this conversation and building up arguments together. So that's our conclusion. All I can recommend is to continue practicing. I've given you some more questions here that you can try and fill out and do in class. Things to do on a long journey. You're thinking obvious things like read, film, stop and have a break, eat, chat, play games. I'm giving you too many. You should be thinking of these. Part-time jobs for students, that's an interesting one. Or everyday objects and their importance. That's a difficult one because they can be so disparate, so different. But that's a possible sort of C1 topic. And what I would recommend, as I said, try and answer these, fill them out, think about typical ideas, have the conversation. Just keep practicing, because the conversation skills, like your comfort of the key skill of idea, pass on the conversation, this gets better, this gets easier. So in summary, remember for part 3, acknowledge the other person. It's a conversation, so yes, I see what you mean, because the same thing happened to me when I really acknowledge what they're saying, listen, acknowledge, conversation, and relevant idea, concisely expressed, and then move on in the conversation. To practice your tasks. I think these are quite easy and even fun. And this is an English teacher speaking, but for me, there's a lot of worse things you have to do in class sometimes. So if you are studying, this is not the worst thing that you have to do in class. It can be quite fun. You can even make some fun options with you and your friend. You can make them a little bit sillier or more unusual than they would be on the exam. You are still practicing the main skills. I have to mention, don't I, that one of my young students who did this question for what should you do on how to kill the time on a long journey, and a surprisingly young student who said Netflix and chill, and she was just having fun with it. But very good. Make your own, practice them. Find someone, practice with a timer as well, 2 minutes, 1 minute, short turns, having a good conversation. Right, that's part 3. Hope you enjoyed, hope it was helpful. Please watch all my videos on this C1 course that I'm uploading, and especially part 4, which will be the next video. Bye.